Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch.
First of all, you wonder why I don't talk to you, but you sit here and call me a bitch to my face.
You
on national
laugh
TV
at
again.
everything that she says.
Oh my God.
You literally have been laughing at everything she says. That's disrespectful. You have no room to call her disrespectful.
Because she's
I'm
not,
sorry.
She is telling, look, I get it. This is your version of the truth. But I feel very attacked. Where it's like you're saying that I didn't do something honestly when, again, this entire time you were asking me.
No, it's my shit. He's a terrible advocate for himself. There's so many other ways he could respond, even if he is caught in something. All he has to say is, I was absolutely in the relationship. Yeah, and then it makes you wonder, was he being vulnerable earlier when he was saying, I gave you all this love? You know, is it possible that he's saying that as a way to make himself look better? I don't know. I hate thinking this way. A lot of people assume these kinds of things. I don't tend to think that those assumptions are very valid. I mean, we can never know. But in my experience, maybe not y'all, but other discussions online, people just assume the worst about everyone. Even the hosts get thrown under the bus. I'm sure I get thrown under the bus sometimes. I don't know. I hope not. But in this instance, and then I have to ask myself, well, why does it feel like a possibility? I guess it feels like a possibility because the way that he broke up with her seems so bizarre, and it did seem so shoehorned and unconvincing, poorly executed. And I guess we're seeing it again, right? He is in a bind and he can't be straightforward. And then he asks, well, why couldn't, because I've been wondering why I remember thinking at the time, like, why not just, if it is true that something else happened, why not just say that? But then, you know, you throw in the meeting with the dad, then that would really, maybe that's it. Maybe if they just never had the meeting with the dad, then he could have broken up with her and said, look, I feel disrespected about the nap thing, but really it's because I've been on the fence ever since we had that big fight. But he can't say that because he's like worried that he'll be called out because of his behavior with the dad. I don't know. The more you think about it, especially when you put that dad, it was one of the most over the top displays from a potential future in-law of, I love you, I love her, I want to be in this family, please accept my please give me permission to marry your child. And when you have that in there, and then you have that big fight and the fact that he was going to leave, and then you have that breakup, it just doesn't make any sense. It's possible that people can change their mind. It happens. Absolutely. We saw that with Johnny on season 5 when she liked, who was it that she liked? Izzy? Yeah, right? And then was devastated, or was it Izzy? Anyway, Johnny liked someone, and then she dumped someone, and then she went for someone, and then the other person dumped her, and then she's like, no, I want to be with that friend. And it just looked like she was just wanting to be on the show. Which is possible, but another possibility is that, people change their mind. That happens. So it's possible, but it's hard. And he doesn't help by not telling us that, right? If he just said, look, this was but he just keeps saying, you were disrespectful and you called me a name. She called you a name in Cabo. So that doesn't explain why you were so. And then you wonder, was this vindictive because of what happened in Cabo, that a part of him was like, I'm going to get her hopes up and then kick her in the gut while she's vulnerable? I mean, that's horrible, right? But worse things have happened in breakups. Even in normal breakups, some pretty awful things can happen sometimes. It's just interesting to think about the possibilities of, given what we saw with Tim, it does raise some red flags What do you think?
I didn't do something honestly when, again, this entire time you were asking me to do everything I can for your family. So I did it. And I don't feel like I was getting anything in return. That entire week, I am telling you, hey.
See, that part sounds like he was trying to show her, look how respectful I am. Please respect me. Look how I'm showing up, how much effort. And this is in the camp of preoccupied attachment. I point this out partially because it kind of looks like it, but also partially because a lot of people, a lot of men are misidentified as not having preoccupied attachment. The typical way that describe preoccupied attachment is often assuming that the person with anxious attachment is a woman. And it'll show differently, or it'll look differently. To me, it doesn't really show differently. It just, I guess, looks differently if you're looking through the gender lens. But there's a lot of things pointing that I can't know if that's what's going on with him, but there's a possibility that he was so blinded with his effort to get her to show up and be secure for him, even though she might have been, but he was just interpreting everything as if she were abandoning him, And he went into that meeting with the family, with her family, with 99% of his efforts trying to show her, look how respect looks like. Look how respectful I am. Look how much effort, can you please do that for me? And then and so I guess that would also fit, because then when they had his family, she showed up maybe normally, or at least, but given the way that they talked about things, she might actually be a little bit more self-interested or something, but the things that he was pointing out, didn't do the dishes, and he was talking, this is fitting. He was talking about how much effort. I spent so much time that morning making the food, and then I, look how much effort I put into like being nice to your family, and I was so there, and I was so nice to them, and I was there the whole time, and then you didn't do anything. Like, you woke up late, and then you only stuck around for 4 or 5 hours, and you took a nap, and I was still there with my family, and you didn't seem to care at all. And maybe there's like a grain of truth there, but if he is looking at it through an insecure attachment lens, it does make some sense. That all could be true, and he could have also been on the fence due to the fight in Cabo.
Can we work on this? Can we work on this? We can work on this. And I felt like I was getting nothing in return.
Why would I want to meet your parents when you just told me you had doubts after you played in my dad's face?
How did I play in his face?
You played in his face.
What was the joke about that?
You said you wanted to be with me, and you had doubts the entire time. That was a bold lie.
And then you fell asleep on my parents.
Is it safe to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to do this to save both y'all. I think it's safe to say, since you haven't spoken in a year, sorry to the audience, I'm sure you want the juice. I think you guys need to speak afterwards.
Okay, the host is stepping in. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I don't think there's anything that they're just trying to win a fight, and we're not really hearing anything new. Yeah, and for their sake, I think it's best just to...
Garrett doing a little fishing. Do you get a chance to catch up with any of the other guys?
Man, the boys has been the boys, so obviously...
And before I forget, of course, the fact that his 2 sisters died is a potential candidate for the traumas that could affect him in the ways that we see him on the show. It's hard to know. But, I mean, certainly those losses would affect him in some way, but it's more likely to me, in my experience, that if he does have some kind of traumas, relational traumas that are giving him the sensitivities and the defenses that make it harder for him to accept a little bit of distance. I guess, the anxious attachment might also have been triggered when she was crying and she was like, leave me alone. Or she might have been asking nicely, and that he uses the word respect to denote that experience of being terrified of abandonment or unfairly rejected or something. Usually those kinds of traumas happen early in life, like 0 to 5. They can be compounded later by death. When people die in our lives, of course, rationally, even when we're young, we understand that we're not being abandoned, but it can very much feel like an abandonment, particularly when we're young. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So it's time for Thanksgiving, And in my family, we always have a really big Thanksgiving. My dad always gets us into a circle before dinner, and we hold hands, and we each give thanks for things in our lives. And afterwards, I always feel really uplifted. Research has actually shown that giving gratitude is associated with a lot of positive mental health outcomes and also with positive health benefits like improved sleep and improved immune system. Therapy can be a great place to explore our gratitude. There are likely positive aspects of ourselves that we don't see that a therapist can help us to discover, and then we can have gratitude even for things about ourselves. Well, one place you can find a therapist is at BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's definitely worth giving a try. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
Washington, D.C. crew for taking this leap and opening your hearts to us all. Thank you guys so much.
Good night, everybody.
All right, so they showed a bunch of scenes of Tyler and Ashley having fun together. And the whole time I'm thinking, what about your children? And I don't know the full story, but if we go with what Bree told us, then it's hard to watch that, because what you're watching is Tyler having fun in this new family. I mean, some of you might know what that feels like. When you were a kid, your parent, abandoned you, or at the very least spent very little time with you, might have even not acknowledged you, and started a new family. And people knew that, your parent as this wonderful family man or family woman. Meanwhile, you're across town or in another part of the world, and, you're abandoned and wishing you could even just have contact, let alone having the things that their new kids, your parents' new kids. It just, I don't think we've ever seen something like that. And I don't know if that's what's happening, but if that's what's happening, it's heartbreaking. I found out from my contact on the show that they filmed this before October 19th, which is when Bree posted those public statements. So up until that point, they wouldn't know. I asked my contact what she knew, and she told me what she knew, and she surmised what production knew as well. And long story short, she said that what you see on the show is basically the entirety of what production knew. And you could imagine that production would not suspect that Tyler would lie about that, right? I mean, the way it looks is that Tyler and Ashley talked about the whole thing, and then they devised a story that they wanted to display in front of the cameras, and didn't really talk about it that much, because she was saying that he, when she asked you, do they know what you look like? He gave like a really dumbfounding answer, and she says in the moment, she was like, what kind of answer is that? At least that's the way it looked. And so it sounds like they didn't really talk about exactly what they're, anyway, it's hard to watch that. It's hard to be excited. They think the show, the reunion, thinks they're ending on this really nice note, and then you think, how many people know? It doesn't really matter, but you got to figure 99% of the audience doesn't look up other information and therefore wouldn't know what's going on. It doesn't really matter in terms of audience, but it does matter in those children's lives. And in Bree's life, Bree was abandoned too. So I don't know. I just got done watching. I was just like, I wanted to react and say like, that's another, because they're showing all these scenes of them having fun and doing all these selfie videos. And I'm like, that's another moment where they're not with his kids. That's another moment where they're not with his. And I thought that's just not okay to do. So that's the headspace I'm in. I need to get out of this headspace. So eventually I'll do a final word, but not today. And I'll also go over, I'm going to watch other posts. I'm really curious what Ashley and or Tyler have posted, if anything. I'm also curious what, Stacy told me that Marissa posted something. I'm curious what else Leo has said, what Steven might have said. I'm curious what, I don't know if this is just recency bias, but I feel like this season provided a lot of stuff to chew on and jump off from. Now, of course, when I really think about it, in other seasons, there was a lot of that as well. Like the Jimmy and Chelsea thing was extremely, up my alley, I guess you could say. So there's that. The Laura and Jeremy thing. But I feel like this season there was a lot to get into. I mean, the Ramsey-Marissa thing, I mean, that's a big thing. You got Nick and Hannah. You got Steven and Marissa. You got Tim and Alex. You got Leo and Brittany. And then you have Tyler and Ashley as well. I mean, and even Garrett and Taylor had a moment at the party that gave us something to chew on, I don't know if that's the right metaphor. But I thought I would just quickly review the stats. Maybe I'll go over this again in the final word episode. But we have, so if I include UK season 1, then we have 8 seasons that I've watched and reacted to and am analyzing. We have 240 cast members, 30 every season. You have 48 featured couples in the edit, which means there's a 40% chance of being featured, which is interesting because it doesn't feel that way, right? It doesn't feel like a 40% chance. But if you have, 6 couples-ish every season out of a potential 15, that's about close, and then sometimes there's other people that are featured, right? Because of triangles or, Zach and Bliss, that kind of thing. So a 40% chance if you are cast on the show of you being featured, heavily in the edit. And then, so you have 240 cast members, 48 featured couples, so, 96 cast members that are featured. And then 28 weddings. So out of 48 potential weddings, you have 28 weddings, which is, roughly about 60%. And that's interesting, right? It's like you have a 60% chance. So that means there's a 40% chance that you will get engaged but not make it to the wedding. That seems higher but there you go. And also, of the 28 weddings, you have 15 marriages, which means that you have just under 50% of having a yes, which is higher than you would think. You would think, anecdotally for me anyway, that it would be far less than of the weddings we've seen, almost half have been a yes. And then I think it's because the yeses aren't as memorable. And then of the 15 marriages in the 8 seasons that I've watched, 13 couples are still married. So that's 87% couples are still married today. But that doesn't say a lot because we'll check in another 5-10 years and see how many of them are married. Statistics would predict that about 40% of them will be divorced, maybe even more than that, since some of them are on second marriages, because statistically those are more likely to get divorced. Not necessarily within 5 or 10 years, but generally speaking, I think the stats are if a divorce is going to happen, it's going to happen in those early years. So that's interesting. Not that it makes it worthless, and I believe there are 3 kids. You have Amber and Barnett, I believe, are having a child or had a child. Alexa and Brennan, and we saw Zach and Bliss with a kid. So it's pretty interesting. 15 marriages, 13 couples out of a possible 120 couples. Yeah, so there's a possibility of 120 marriages, and you have 13. So so if you go on the show, you have about an 11% chance of getting married. Do I have that right? So you have 120 possible couples in 8 seasons. So 120 so yeah, you have about a 10%, let's say 10% chance that's interesting, right? If you get called to come on the show and you are actually in the market for meeting the one and getting married, I mean, those are good odds to say that you have a 1 in 10 chance of meeting and marrying and staying married to the love of your life. I mean, I think that says, and that seems higher than what you would think, right? Given how few couples, but when you think about all the possible couples, I mean, 10% isn't great, right? But you give that option to a lot of people. They'll be like, sure, I'll take 2 weeks off of work and run the risk of being a villain for those odds, because people will often accuse everyone on these shows of going on the show because they just want their Instagram followers so they can be influencers. And I looked up their followership on Instagram, and from what I can tell, it's not like the first few seasons. The first few, like Jessica, for example, I think she has like maybe 1 million, I don't know, like a lot. And Cam and Lauren, they were like instant Instagram careerists, if you will. I don't know what, I'm sure they have other jobs, but like there's this accusation like, they're only going on the show. I think with other reality TV shows, it seems to be that way, or there's a more viable accusation there. But I think and I'm sure that happens on the show, but I think the way that they cast and the sort of people it attracts, it seems to actually be getting people that are trying. I mean, you think about Tim and Alex, they're fighting at the reunion. They look like they were invested. If they weren't invested, I don't think they would have been so reactive on stage. So, some real stuff is happening. And when I see evidence of real stuff happening, it makes it so much more interesting and compelling television, and also makes it so much easier for me to comment on as a clinician. I talk about this sometimes about how the available examples to show students when I'm trying to demonstrate conflict and what relationship dynamics look like, it's really hard to find those. Often they're actors, and it's poorly acted and poorly scripted. So to have an actual example of and I'll tell you that the kind of stuff that I see on this show, of all the variety that we see, it is exactly the sort of thing that I see in my office. Like, just exactly. Not exactly, to a particular couple, but the sort of thing, the energy, the misunderstanding, the hurt, the distortions, the defenses, the criticism, the resentment, the defensiveness. It's exactly the way it looks. And I am glad that this exists so that we can use it to think about our own lives. I know that you have done that, and that it gives me a chance to think about my own life, and also think about my clinical work, and to share my thoughts. And so y'all will, do with it what you will. So yeah, until next time, when I watch social media posts or podcast interviews, I'll also be reviewing the survey results, the end of season survey results. I'm not going to look at them until I make that episode. A lot of these episodes will just be for members, so if you want to become a member, it'd be really great. And then I'll do a final word, and then that will be that. And then apparently they have season 8 coming up on Valentine's Day, on the 5-year anniversary. I forgot that the first season started on Valentine's Day, which is interesting to think about because, well, anyway. But I think the second season of Queer Love, Ultimatum, will be coming out in between, I'm thinking. So it won't be that long. In between these, I'm going to go full watch of the show and post 2 episodes a day on the YouTube channel when it comes to Love is Blind US. I'm not going to watch any of the other Love is Blinds. I know that some of you want me to, and I do want to, but I just have to limit my work because I love doing this. And if I do what I want, and if I do what you want, which is the same, is to watch all these shows, I will never not be in this seat, and my health will go down the tubes, and my life will go down the tubes, and it'll be bad. So I have to. So I've landed on. I will watch Love Is Blind US, and every season I will go full on, and I will do 2 episodes a day, and I'll do, in all likelihood, YouTube lives like I've been doing, and other kinds of activities. Just kind of like, let's do this thing. And then I'll also do Ultimatum Queer Love only, not the other ultimatums, because I don't know, there's not much to go off of with that. But with Queer Love, there was a lot to go off of. There was, and just for representation's sake, I think it's good. And I am positive they'll come out with Love Is Blind LGBTQIA or something, or Queer Love, Love Is Blind or something. There's got to be. It'd be harder to engineer because of how this is hetero organized. You have the women on one side, the men on the other. But there's got to be a way. I've often brainstormed just as how it look. Like one way is that you don't have a lounge. Like everyone. So if you have 30 gay guys and none of them are to see each other in a lounge. They just show up for the pods and then they go back to the hotel. They show up for the pods. You don't need the lounge. And the other thought I had was that there are lounges for each cast member, but they bring their friends. So you get them talking with their friends, right? Something like that, right? Because you don't need to have it would take away from the drama that occurs when the cast members do confer. Or what you do is once the cast says, okay, I'm zeroing in on these 2 people, then you as a cast member are free to go to the lounge and hang out with people that are not your people that you're going after. That would be weird. But anyway, point is that this has got to happen eventually. I mean, in a perfect world, they would just have Love Is Blind and they would have everybody. They'd have all sorts of people, and you would just have a variety, Because I suspect there's a number of people like Carlton on season 1 who are bisexual, who are totally open to dating people of any gender, and so or pansexual, right? So the perfect world, you just have this in the same way that the world is, but it's just in the Love Is Blind format, Anyway, but you wouldn't have the lounge. Is the point. I'm rambling, but so with Love Is Blind US, with Ultimatum Queer Love, I will watch. I will go full on, and I think that's about 3 or 4 seasons a year ish, maybe 3, and three runs of. I think it usually takes me like 2.5 months. So there's that. Then I will, in between, be after I finish Sister Wives, I'll be watching just 90 Day Fiancé. Stacy told me that there's another season of Last Resort coming out, and that's with they go to the resort and there's the therapy and everything. And that's right up my alley. We get to see Big Ed regress to a leprechaun, if you're familiar. Anyway, so I will be doing that in between, and we'll see how that goes. I'm also planning on, in my deep dives with Umberto for patrons, leaning in a little bit more into true crime stuff, but also adding my own psychological angle to those true crime common stories, like Menendez brothers, that kind of stuff. So I'm curious about what that would look like. I'm yammering, but interesting season, and I'll save my thoughts for the final word episode because I have a lot to say. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because I'm pointing at you, because you deserve it. You really, really do.